I used to think I knew Julia. We'd been married for years, and life felt comfortable, predictable. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? I thought we had a good thing going. A perfect thing, even. We were the couple everyone else envied, successful, happy, in love. Or so I thought. Julia had a way about her. She was beautiful, confident, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command attention without saying a word. I often joked that I didn't deserve her, but truth be told, I believed it. She was everything I wasn't, ambitious, driven, and effortlessly charming. She had this mysterious aura that made you want to know more. But then, something changed. It started small, subtle. The late nights, the constant, "I've got a lot of work to do" excuses. At first, I let it slide. She was busy. She had her own career, her own ambitions. It was normal, I told myself. But the more it happened, the less I bought it. The tipping point came one evening when she told me she was heading into the city for a late-night meeting. That was new. She'd never done that before. I didn't want to sound suspicious, so I kept quiet. But a gnawing feeling settled in my gut, something telling me I was missing something. It wasn't just that evening. It was the pattern. Late nights, early mornings, always an excuse. The tension between us grew. She stopped sharing details about her day, avoided eye contact when we spoke. Something was off. So, one night, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a concrete reason other than a gut feeling. She thought I was asleep, and as soon as the door clicked behind her, I slipped out, keeping a safe distance. I watched her drive toward a part of town I didn't recognize, her car winding through unfamiliar streets. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover something I wasn't ready for. I stayed far enough behind her, headlights off, keeping to the shadows. She turned onto a narrow, poorly lit street, and my heart started racing. I didn't know why I was following her, but I couldn't stop. She pulled up to a nondescript building, faded brick with no name. She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking in the silence, and walked toward the door. My mind was spinning. What was she doing here? Who was she meeting? I told myself it was nothing. A work meeting, maybe. But the secrecy unsettled me. She hadn't mentioned anything about this place. Why hide it? I waited. 10 minutes? 15? I checked my watch. Why wasn't she coming back? I considered leaving, but something held me there. Something told me this wasn't just business. Then the door creaked open. Julia stepped out, but she wasn't alone. A man followed her. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket, dark hair. I didn't know him. They stood for a moment talking, and then she smiled at him. A smile that wasn't for me. I felt a punch in my gut. She leaned in and kissed him, and I couldn't move. I watched, frozen, as they exchanged a few more words before she got back into her car. The man stood in the doorway, watching her drive away, before disappearing inside. I stayed there, staring at the building, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Julia was seeing someone else, a stranger to me. I had no idea how long this had been going on or who he was, but the truth hit me hard. I still didn't know anything for sure, but I couldn't deny what I'd just seen. I stayed in the car for a while after Julia left, the silence pressing in on me. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to process what I had just seen. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me, and I was left floating, disconnected. I kept replaying the kiss in my head, that smile, the way she had looked at him, like she hadn't looked at me in months, maybe longer, the way he leaned in, how natural it seemed. They weren't just acquaintances, it wasn't a business meeting. There was something intimate in that moment, something that made my stomach turn. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to go home and wait for her to come through the door and demand answers. But what would I say? How could I confront her when I didn't even know who he was? What if I was wrong? What if it wasn't what it looked like? But I wasn't wrong. I knew what I had seen. Eventually, I drove home, the long road back to our house feeling impossibly quiet. I couldn't shake the image of Julia with him, the way she'd kissed him as if I didn't exist. How long had she been seeing him? Was it just this one time, or had this been going on for weeks, months? The house felt empty when I got inside. Julia wasn't home yet. I wanted to wait, to talk to her, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure what I'd say. How could I ask her about him when I had nothing, no evidence, no name, just the image of her with a stranger? I tried to distract myself, turning on the TV, but nothing held my attention. The clock ticked louder than usual. Every minute that passed felt like a weight pressing down on me. When she came in an hour later, I pretended to be asleep on the couch. I heard the soft click of the door, the quiet rustling as she moved through the house. She paused by the kitchen and then walked toward our bedroom, trying to be as quiet as possible. I wanted to confront her, but the words weren't there. What could I possibly say when everything felt like a lie? I stayed still, hoping that by morning I'd know what to do, but I didn't. The questions were only getting louder. The next morning, I pretended like nothing had happened. I had to. I couldn't confront her just yet, not without knowing more, not without having something solid to stand on. But inside, I was restless, the knot in my stomach tightening with every passing minute. Julia was already up when I came downstairs. She was in the kitchen, making coffee, humming as though nothing was wrong. I watched her for a moment. She was so casual, so normal, as if nothing had changed. She turned to me, smiling. "Good morning," she said, her voice light, her eyes warm. It was the same voice, the same eyes I had looked into for years, but now I couldn't shake the image of her with that man. I smiled back, though it felt stiff, like my face didn't quite know how to mimic the expression anymore. "Morning." She handed me a cup of coffee, then leaned against the counter, waiting for me to take a sip. But all I could think about was the night before, how she'd left, how she'd kissed him, how she'd acted like it was nothing. "So," she said, clearly trying to start the day like any other. "Anything planned for today?" I had no idea how to respond. My mind was spinning, trying to form the right words. I wanted to ask her where she'd gone, who she'd been with, what the hell was going on. But I couldn't. Not like this, not without the truth hanging over me like a weight I couldn't shake. I settled for something simple. "Just work," I said. "You?" She nodded, sipping her coffee. "Yeah, I've got a meeting later. Nothing too exciting." I could feel the lie in her words, but I said nothing. Instead, I took a slow sip of my coffee, pretending to be absorbed in the steam rising from the mug, pretending that I didn't know what I knew. She moved past me to grab her bag, then paused. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked, her voice soft, like she was concerned. I froze. Was she onto me? Did she know something had changed? My heart skipped a beat. I had to be careful, had to play it cool. "Yeah," I said, my voice coming out more clipped than I intended. "Just a little tired. Long night." She didn't press further. She just smiled again and left for work. I watched her go, then set my coffee cup down, my fingers trembling slightly. I couldn't keep pretending. I had to know who he was. I had to find out what was really going on. But I didn't know where to start. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. Work felt like a distant echo, and every moment of silence seemed louder than the last. I kept thinking about Julia, her smile, her laugh, the way she acted like nothing had changed. Meanwhile, I was falling apart on the inside, unable to shake the image of her with that man. I spent hours staring at the walls, walking through the house, aimlessly checking my phone for messages that never came. The thought of confronting her without any solid proof kept me stuck. I couldn't just accuse her of something so huge based on a gut feeling and a kiss. But as the hours stretched on, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had already seen enough. I'd seen her with him, and the way she kissed him. It wasn't casual. It wasn't just a mistake. It was something deeper, something that had been building for who knows how long. I couldn't sit in the dark anymore. I needed to know more, to understand who he was, to figure out how to stop this before it destroyed everything. I thought about the building, the place she'd gone the night before. I needed to go back, see it for myself, find out what was really going on. Maybe I could catch him there, get a name, get something concrete, anything that would make this madness real instead of the question marks in my mind. I drove back to that street. The building was just as I remembered. No sign, no indication of what went on inside. But this time, I was prepared. I parked farther down the block and waited, watching the entrance closely. My palms were sweaty, my stomach in knots. Every second felt like an eternity. It was quiet at first, but then, a few minutes later, I saw a man walk out of the building. Not the man from last night, but someone else. He was older, dressed in a sharp suit, looking like someone who belonged in an office building, not some run-down place in the middle of nowhere. I watched him for a while, but nothing seemed to connect. He wasn't the one I was looking for, and he didn't seem familiar. But there was something about him, something that made my gut twist again. I stayed longer, waiting to see if anyone else would show up, but it wasn't until I saw Julia's car turn onto the street that my heart nearly stopped. She was back. The same car, the same calm expression. She parked and went inside, just like before. Was he inside now? Was she meeting him again? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find out. I sat there for a while, watching the building, fighting the urge to burst in and demand answers. Julia's car was parked outside, and once again, she walked toward the door without a second glance. The same routine, the same secrecy. The man from earlier was gone, but that didn't matter. I had seen enough. I waited another 20 minutes before I finally got out of the car. My legs felt like they were made of lead, each step heavier than the last. My heart was pounding in my chest as I crossed the street toward the building. I knew I couldn't just walk in. This wasn't my business, but the thought of sitting in the car, waiting for her to come out again, was unbearable. I needed something, anything. I stepped into the alley next to the building, trying to remain hidden, and found a spot where I could see the door without being too obvious. It was stupid, reckless even, but I was desperate. The minutes dragged by, and then the door creaked open. Julia stepped out first, but again, she wasn't alone. The man from last night, the man, was with her. I could see the faint outline of his face as they spoke, standing a little too close to each other. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I watched them. They were laughing. It was easy, like they shared a private joke. The way she looked at him, it was everything I'd been missing. I hadn't seen that look in a long time. He leaned in, and this time, it wasn't just a kiss on the cheek. It was a full kiss, a kiss that lingered. Julia closed her eyes and kissed him back. I couldn't breathe. Everything inside me screamed to move, to yell, to run up and drag her away. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the sheer weight of what I was seeing. This was the truth. This wasn't a misunderstanding or my imagination. She pulled away, just as they finished talking, and then they both walked toward the parking lot, her hand briefly brushing his arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't take it anymore. My legs gave way beneath me, and I slumped against the wall, feeling a sickening wave of disbelief and anger wash over me. How long had this been going on? How long had she been hiding him from me, and what else had she been hiding? I should have gone after her, demanded answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, helpless, as she climbed into her car and drove off with him. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I was left there, standing in the cold, alone with my thoughts and my shattered trust. I stood there for a long time after they left, the weight of what I'd seen sinking in. Julia's kiss with that man replayed in my head, each time sharper than the last. I couldn't process it. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to follow her again, but I knew I couldn't. I had seen enough to know this wasn't just a random encounter. It was real. This man, whoever he was, had been part of her life in a way I hadn't been. I couldn't pretend otherwise. What now? I couldn't go back home. I couldn't look at Julia and pretend nothing was wrong. I needed space to think, to make sense of everything. I drove for hours, no real destination in mind. The streets were empty, and the silence felt suffocating. The longer I drove, the more my thoughts spiraled. How long had this been going on? What had I missed? What else was she hiding from me? By the time I reached the water, it was dusk. I parked and sat on a bench by the edge, letting the cold air sting my face. I stared out at the waves, but all I could think of was Julia, her smile, the way she'd kissed him. I couldn't shake the image. I couldn't stop wondering if this had been happening behind my back for months, or if it was something new. I couldn't focus on the sound of the water anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Julia. "I'm home. Hope your day wasn't too stressful. Let's have dinner when you get back." I stared at the words, the casualness of it, the heart emoji. How could she act like nothing had happened, like everything was fine? I didn't reply. I couldn't. I didn't know what to do, what to say, or how to move forward. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in the dark. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but I wasn't going back without answers. I spent the rest of the evening in a haze, still processing what I had seen. I'd driven around for hours trying to make sense of everything, but no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, the images in my mind didn't fade. Julia smiling at him, that kiss, the way they stood so close. I finally pulled into the driveway late at night, the house dark and quiet. She was already inside, probably asleep, but I couldn't shake the urge to confront her, to demand the truth, even though I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. The house felt foreign, like I was walking into a stranger's home. I stood in the entryway, my hand on the doorframe, trying to find the courage to move. What would I even say? "I saw you with another man?" No, it wouldn't be that simple. It never was. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and sat down at the table. My mind kept circling back to the same question. Why? Why would she do this? We weren't perfect, but we had a good life, a solid foundation. I thought I knew her, but now it felt like I was in the dark. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Julia. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all evening. I miss you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was so casual, so loving, like nothing had changed. How could she act like everything was fine? How could she send me a message like that after what I saw? I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. I could tell her I wasn't okay, that I knew what she had done. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear her excuses, or worse, her lies. Instead, I set the phone down and walked to the bedroom. She was asleep, her back to me, the steady rise and fall of her chest the only sign that she was there. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, fighting the urge to shake her awake and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. I climbed into bed beside her, the space between us feeling like a chasm. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, what I knew, but I didn't say a word. I didn't know what to say. So I lay there in the dark, pretending to sleep while my mind raced. I still didn't know who that man was, but I was going to find out. And when I did, everything would change. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still clouded with questions. Julia was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful, unaware of the storm swirling inside me. For a moment, I just watched her. She looked so familiar, so normal. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew. But that image of her with him, the smile, the kiss, kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, it was there. I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. I decided to take action. I couldn't just sit around pretending I didn't know what was happening. The waiting, the uncertainty, it was eating me alive. But where do I even start? I couldn't ask her outright without knowing more. I had to figure out who this man was first before I could confront her. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the place, the building. I had to know if he was still there, if I could find something that would tell me who he was. Maybe the details, the little things, would add up. I drove over to the street again, parked a few blocks away, and watched. The building looked the same as it had the night before, quiet, abandoned-looking. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, that maybe this man was just someone she'd met through work or a friend. But that gut feeling, that gnawing suspicion, told me it was something more. I waited for what felt like an eternity, the minutes dragging on. No sign of Julia, no sign of anyone coming or going. I couldn't help but feel like I was wasting my time. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. And then, just as I was about to leave, a car pulled up. The same man. He stepped out, wearing a dark jacket, his expression as unreadable as it had been the night before. My heart skipped a beat. I had him right there. I stayed low in the car, watching as he approached the building and disappeared inside. My hands were shaking. It was him, the man Julia had been with, the man who had kissed her. But I still had no idea who he was, no name, no connection to her, just his face. I needed to know more. But I couldn't follow him inside. That was too obvious. I had to be smart. I had to wait. I drove away, but my mind was racing. I wasn't any closer to the truth, but at least now I had something, a lead, a starting point. And I was going to figure out who he was, no matter what it took. I couldn't shake the image of him, his face, his confident stride as he walked into that building. I had seen his expression clearly this time, and there was something unsettling about it. He wasn't nervous or anxious like a man caught in some illicit affair. No, he was comfortable. Too comfortable. The whole thing felt wrong, like a puzzle missing a piece, and I was desperate to find it. But I couldn't just show up at the building and demand answers. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't a cop. I was just a guy whose wife had betrayed him. But I had to keep going. Back at home, I couldn't sit still. Julia was already getting ready for work, her routine untouched by the chaos swirling in my mind. I watched her move through the house, her calm energy only heightening my sense of dread. I had to do something. I couldn't let this go. The man, the building, everything was connected, and I needed to unravel it. So, I decided to track him. I didn't know how, but I had to start somewhere. I remembered the car. His car. It wasn't hard to spot. It was an old black sedan, clean but a bit worn. I hadn't seen it leave when I drove away, but it was still a lead. I could find out where it was parked. Maybe I could get lucky. I spent the day driving around trying to stay inconspicuous, looking for that car. I figured if I didn't find it today, I'd be back tomorrow. And the next day, if I had to. The thought of waiting for Julia to come home and pretend like nothing was wrong twisted my gut. I needed control, something to hang on to. It wasn't until late in the afternoon that I found it. The black sedan was parked a few streets over, in a residential area, almost hidden between two houses. I parked a few cars down, trying to remain as discreet as possible. My heart raced as I sat there, staring at it, wondering what the hell I was doing. I couldn't sit there forever. So I started walking toward the car, not sure what I was expecting to find. Maybe a clue inside, something that could link him to her, something that would finally make sense of all this. But as I neared the sedan, my stomach dropped. A woman was standing by the car. I could only see her from behind, but there was something about her posture, the way she held herself. It was familiar. Too familiar. My first thought was that maybe she knew him, but as she turned slightly, I froze. It was Julia. She was standing there, talking to him, not just a quick exchange. She was leaning in, speaking quietly, her body language relaxed. She wasn't just meeting him, she was comfortable with him. This wasn't just a random affair, it was something deeper. I didn't know what to do. My mind screamed at me to leave, to go back home and confront her. But I couldn't tear myself away from the scene. I watched them talk, the distance between us closing the longer I stood there, unable to move. I couldn't breathe as I watched Julia and the man talk, their heads close, their body language so at ease with each other, it made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I felt the ground beneath me shift, the last shred of my trust in her slipping away with every passing second. She was with him again, and this time I could hear her laugh, soft, genuine, a laugh I hadn't heard in ages. It wasn't for me, it was for him. I stood frozen in place, barely able to move. The shock was paralyzing, my legs stiff as if the ground had rooted me to the spot. I wasn't ready for this. Wasn't ready to watch the woman I loved so comfortably share herself with someone else, but I couldn't look away. Julia reached out, touching his arm as they spoke. My stomach twisted violently, the anger and hurt bubbling up, but I couldn't make myself move. I couldn't confront them here, not like this. I had no idea what I was walking into, and part of me was terrified of hearing something I wasn't ready to hear. So I stood there, watching them. And then, something changed. Julia pulled away and got into her car, leaving him standing by the sedan. It was as if their conversation had ended, but there was no urgency in her movements, no rush, just casual. I took a few steps back, not wanting to be noticed, and waited until she drove off. The black sedan remained, parked in the same spot. I had to know more. What was this? Were they just friends? Was it all innocent? Or was there something darker at play here? The man was still by the car when she left, but he didn't follow her. He stayed there, standing with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground, lost in thought. It wasn't the behavior of someone who had just said goodbye to a casual acquaintance. He was waiting for something, or someone. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront him, to ask who the hell he was and why he was with my wife, but I didn't. I didn't want to start something I couldn't finish, especially when I still had so little information. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just an affair, it was something more, something complicated. After a few more minutes, he finally got in the car and drove off. I waited until he was gone before following at a distance, hoping he'd lead me somewhere. I didn't know where, but I had to know. I couldn't go home with this same knot in my chest. I had to understand. I followed him for miles, the weight of my thoughts pressing harder with each turn. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to find, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know where he was going, what his life looked like. Maybe there would be something there, something that could explain everything. The road twisted through suburban neighborhoods before he finally turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street. I slowed my car, keeping a good distance, and watched him pull into a driveway of a modest house. It wasn't much, nothing extravagant, but it felt like the end of the trail. My heart hammered as I sat in the car, watching the man get out, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked back toward the street, almost as if he felt someone watching him. I quickly ducked down, my heart racing. Had he seen me? No, it couldn't be. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but he didn't look in my direction again. He went inside, disappearing behind the door of the house. I sat in the car for a while, staring at the house, trying to gather my thoughts. This was a lead, one step closer to understanding what was happening between Julia and him. But what was I going to do with it? Knock on his door? Demand answers? I knew that wasn't an option. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to confront the man who had somehow become the center of everything that had been unraveling in my life. Instead, I turned around and drove home. I didn't even feel like I had a destination anymore. I was just numb, exhausted by the constant loop of questions and suspicions. When I got home, Julia was already there, sitting on the couch, a book in her hands, her face soft and peaceful. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, wondering how I could have been so blind. How had I missed everything? How had I missed this? She looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're home early. How was your day?" Her voice sounded normal. Too normal. I didn't know how she could act like everything was fine when I had seen her with him. I had just watched her kiss that man. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't even pretend. "Fine," I muttered, walking into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. My throat felt dry, my hands shaking slightly. I had so much I wanted to say, so much I wanted to scream. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, not yet. She followed me, her footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. "You sure? You've been acting weird all day." I turned to face her, and for a moment I wanted to say everything, to tell her I knew, that I saw her with him, that I couldn't take it anymore. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm fine." I couldn't stay in the same room with her. I needed to get out, away from the lie she was living, away from the silence between us. I left the kitchen and went upstairs, locking myself in the bedroom. I didn't know what the next step was. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing the bedroom, my thoughts spiraling faster than I could process them. Julia was downstairs, probably pretending everything was fine. But I knew better now. I had seen her with him. The kiss, the way she looked at him, it was too much to ignore. And yet, here I was, locked in a room, too afraid to face her, too unsure of what to do next. I needed answers, but I didn't know how to get them. Confronting her felt like a trap I wasn't ready to walk into. What would I say? How could I accuse her without knowing everything, without knowing who he was or what this affair meant to her? The longer I stayed in the bedroom, the more trapped I felt. My mind kept going over the same loop, her smile, the way she touched him, how easily she'd been able to slip into another life without me even knowing. I didn't recognize the woman I was married to anymore. The person I had spent years building a life with seemed so distant now, so foreign. I pulled out my phone and stared at her last message. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all evening. I miss you." It felt like a joke. How could she ask me that, knowing what I had seen? How could she pretend nothing was wrong? I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the screen. For a moment, I thought about replying, telling her everything I knew, everything I had seen. But I couldn't do it. I wasn't ready. I needed more. I needed him to tell me the truth. I needed him to explain this. I grabbed my jacket, my pulse quickening as I made the decision. I wasn't going to sit here anymore, pretending like I didn't know what was going on. I was going to find out everything I could about this man. I left the house quietly, trying not to wake her. I didn't want to explain myself just yet. I didn't know what I would say. I drove back to the street where I had followed him earlier, hoping for some kind of lead. The house was still there, sitting quietly just like before. The sedan was parked in the driveway. He was home. I parked down the street out of view and waited. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. I couldn't believe I was doing this. But I had to know. I couldn't just keep pretending. It was nearly an hour before the man came outside again. He stepped out of the house, looking around as if checking for something or someone. For a brief moment, I thought he might notice me. But he didn't. He walked to the car and got inside. I had no plan. I didn't know what I was going to do once I approached him, but something inside me pushed me forward. I started my car and followed at a distance. This was it. I was going to confront him. I followed him through the city, my mind a mess of thoughts. He drove slowly, almost deliberately, until he pulled into a quiet, industrial area. The buildings here were dark and lifeless, and something about the place made my stomach twist. But I kept following. I couldn't stop now. He parked outside a large, empty warehouse. The windows were black, and the building had a grim, abandoned look. I parked a little ways down the street, out of view, and waited. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had to know the truth. After a few minutes, he stepped out of the car and walked toward the building. I waited for him to disappear inside. My pulse raced. Was this it? Was I about to uncover everything? I waited. A few more minutes passed. Then I got out of the car, moving quietly. I stayed low, making my way to the side of the building. The night air felt cold, and every sound seemed amplified. I heard voices around the corner, two men talking. One sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I crept closer. Then I saw him, the man I'd been following. He was standing with someone else. The second figure's back was to me, but I had a sinking feeling that I knew who it was. My stomach dropped. I couldn't make out the details, but I had a gut feeling that the man he was meeting wasn't a stranger. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall, trying to stay hidden. My heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't want to be caught here, not now. I needed more information, more clarity. Then I heard a voice I recognized. "I told you we need to be careful." It was Julia. My breath caught in my throat. She was here. She was standing in the shadows with him, the same man I had followed all this time. The truth hit me like a punch in the gut. She had been hiding this from me, from us, all along. I wanted to confront them right there, but I knew I couldn't. I needed to understand more before I did anything. I retreated further into the darkness, my mind racing with everything I had just discovered. I couldn't stay hidden forever, but now I had no choice but to wait. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, my mind spinning as I processed what I had just heard. Julia's voice echoed in my head. "I told you we need to be careful." The words felt like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just an affair, it was something deeper, something she had been keeping from me for longer than I wanted to admit. The secrecy, the lies, they all came rushing back. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I waited, forcing myself to stay still, to not make a sound. Julia and the man continued talking, their voices muffled but unmistakable. The way she spoke to him wasn't like a casual encounter, it was intimate, familiar. Everything about this felt like a betrayal. I knew I had to confront her, confront both of them, but part of me was terrified of what I might hear, of what I might learn. What if there was more to this than I had imagined? What if this wasn't just a secret affair, but something bigger, something that had been going on for months? My mind couldn't stop spinning. I watched them for what felt like hours, each second drawing me deeper into this nightmare. They were standing close, talking low, their body language telling me everything I needed to know. They had shared something real. Eventually, Julia pulled away, walking toward her car with the same calmness I had seen earlier. The man stood there, watching her leave, his hands in his pockets. He didn't rush, didn't seem to care that I had been watching from the shadows. They were both too comfortable with this, too used to hiding in plain sight. I waited until Julia was long gone before I left my hiding spot and made my way back to the car. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, hurt, confusion, betrayal. All of it mixed together into something overwhelming. I started the engine, but I couldn't drive yet. I didn't know where I was going. The road ahead felt just as uncertain as the one behind me. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. I had to know the truth, no matter what it cost. And now, more than ever, I knew there was no going back.